Welcome to Maverick University, an educational series featuring ministry modules taught by ministry-minded Christians and designed to help Christians become more effective in their service for Christ. Welcome to another episode of Maverick University. I'm your host, David Hallberg. Joining me today is Brother Don Ossewaarde. Brother Don Ossewaarde has an extensive background in the ministry and has served as 3 years as a Christian school administrator, 3 years as an evangelist, 20 years as a missionary, and also 3 years at Providence Baptist College. And so I thank you for coming with us and joining us. In a previous episode, Brother Ossewaarde and I talked about the call to the mission field, and you can find the link to that video in the description below. Today, what we'll be discussing is learning a foreign language and culture. So, Brother Ossewaarde, thanks for joining me.
Glad to be here.
Obviously, we in the previous video, we went through your call to the mission field, your background, and obviously, spent a couple of years on deputation, traveled the country, got some support, and then comes that fateful day when you hop on a plane and you have maybe a shipping container, it's shipped over, it's waiting for you, and you step foot on foreign soil and ta-da, we're here. What now? I can't give anybody the gospel. I don't speak Russian.
Right.
Where do you begin? Foreign land, and they've been closed to outside influences for so long, like Russia had for so many years under communism. They would let, I imagine, very few outsiders in before the Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Union broke up. So talk to us about this process of dealing with culture shock, learning languages, learning their culture, things, and maybe even share some stories about that as well. So did you have to learn to speak Russian?
Absolutely. I would tell any missionary, if you're going to a country where they speak something other than English, it's absolutely essential that you learn the native language. Mm-hmm. I know missionaries that spent their entire time of service just working with interpreters, and they would speak in Russian. They always had their interpreter follow them around and do the interpreting for them. And really, you cannot touch someone's heart unless you can speak to them in their native language. How do you counsel with somebody about their marriage problems and have somebody standing in between you interpreting?
That's true.
It's awkward, and something's going to get lost in translation. And I've even heard stories where the interpreter didn't believe what the missionary was saying, so he would change it, and the missionary wouldn't even know that the guy is saying something. So you've got to learn the language. For that reason, when we stepped off the plane and stepped into the former Soviet Union for the first time, I knew that our first task would be learn the language. It was going to take a lot of work, it was going to take a lot of time, and it was going to have to be top priority. I was working with another missionary, a man, actually still to this day a good friend of mine, a man named Matthew Hudson. His son is a student in our college here. Okay. And I told him, I am here to learn the language. I will work with you in your ministry as best I can. I will attend your services, I will go out and distribute literature as best I can, but I'm here to learn the language, and I'm not going to be distracted from that priority. And so we were going to be good Christians, do the best we could with what we knew, but I was going to be devoted to language study for however long it took.
I imagine the temptation for a lot of missionaries in their first term on the mission field is to think, oh man, I got to send out a prayer letter to all these pastors who are supporting me, and I have nothing to report as far as salvations. I didn't start a church yet, and it doesn't sound very exciting. Well, I've been attending language school.
I learned about verbs today.
Yeah, so it doesn't sound like the most spiritual progress, but absolutely essential. And I imagine pastors are understanding.
Yeah, certainly. A lot of missionaries are so zealous that they just say, I've got time for this. I got to get out and start a ministry. We got to build a church and get going. Well, you have to build a foundation I mean, if you just go build a building and you don't have a foundation under it, you might build a big building, but it's going to be on the sand. You need to have a foundation. Language is extremely important.
So how did you go about learning the Russian language? Language school, I imagine, is what most people do.
I enrolled in a full-time university program at we were in Kiev, Ukraine. It was the best place for us to get started. Mm-hmm. They had what they call the Kiev State Linguistics University. And I enrolled in a special program. It was designed for foreigners that don't speak any Russian to learn how to speak Russian. And they had highly developed techniques. They had great textbooks, great teachers, and they didn't even have to speak any English to teach me. They had a program set up to take you from nothing to speaking fluent Russian without.
So you never had an English crutch?
No, I went in there and they would show me a picture of a family, and they would point to the father and say, "Eta Papa," and I would think, she's saying this is the Papa. And then we had to repeat it. And so I'm learning vocabulary words already. Eta mama. She didn't have to know. Now I'm going to tell you what the word for father is. The word for father is Papa. She just used pictures and all kinds of visual aids and films and different things. It was a tremendous program, highly developed. They knew what they were doing. And you need to have, as a missionary, you need to go to a place that has a program.
Now, you had the benefit of going to this university. Did your wife do some classes there as well? And you went to the mission field with children.
Right.
What?
We had 4 kids.
David was what, 8 or 9 years old?
Let's see. When we went to the field, he was 13.
13 years old.
He was 13.
He's older than I thought. And so did they have that benefit as well? If not, how did they go about learning
the program was very demanding. It was 6 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Okay, yeah.
And then I had at least 5, 6, 7 hours of homework every night. So I knew that was too much of a program for them. I hired a tutor for them to come in and work with them. Honestly, after comparing what I was getting to comparing what she was doing with them, I realized she was wasting their time. She was just teaching them some stories and songs. She wasn't working on the grammar. She wasn't getting their vocabulary built up. She didn't have a plan. In fact, it was in her interest to not teach Russian because then we would just keep her going. And so I fired her. We tried several different things. It was about 1.5 years later that I finally realized, you know what, I'm going to have to teach my family how to speak. So we started having classes every day, and I taught them.
And you probably learned a lot of the
By then, I had it all. I followed the same plan I took.
So how long did it take? You said 1.5 years or so for you to get?
I was in the university for two full years.
Okay.
They had a 1-year program for beginners. They had another program for somebody who wanted to take it further to more proficiency, more practice than anything else.
Sure.
And at the end of 2 years, I felt like I had learned enough. I could understand almost everything that I heard. I could read pretty well. I could read newspapers and things. I struggled to say what I wanted to say, but I could do it with difficulty. And really, it took me about another 2 years of just practicing it in real-life situations. I would say it took me 4 years to get fluent where I was comfortable with it.
Wow.
Yeah. It was a very difficult language.
Can you say something in Russian, John 3:16 or something?
Well, John 3:16 in Russian is Евангелие от Иоанна 3:16. Ибо так возлюбил Бог мир, что отдал Сына Своего Единородного, дабы всякий, верующий в Него, не погиб, но имел жизнь вечную. Евангелие от Иоанна 3:16.
I know you said John 3:16, but I don't care what you said. You just sound like a bad guy from an action movie or something like that, speaking Russian like that. So, what were some of the cultural differences you had to deal with? Obviously language, but then everyday living.
The way people live their everyday lives, probably in almost any country, is just different. Some of the examples, when we go, let's say we were to go to a bank, we would instinctively look for a line where we're going to line up to go to the bank window, and we would line up in single file, give the person in front of you some personal space. Of course, now you have to have 6 feet, but some personal space because you don't want to Russians have no concept of standing in line. They walk into a building, an office where you're going to need to get service, and whoever gets there first gets served.
That's it.
There's no concept of you were here before me. There was a method you could use to get your place in line. You walk in and you say, who's the last person? Kto последний? Who's the last person? And someone would say, I am. And then you would say, I'm right after you. And then you keep your eyes locked on that person, and that person knows who's before him. And if you don't do that, you're never going to get to the front of the line.
So you got to call dibs.
You call dibs, and they don't stand in line. They just kind of, because they know that if they get a chance, they're just going to move up and.
So if you're not paying attention,
yes,
then somebody will just jump in.
They will just jump in.
They see the opening. Okay.
Yes. And like I talked about personal space. I mean, you get on a bus, a public bus, and you're going somewhere, and somebody gets on and they just, you hang onto a bar so you don't fall down.
Sure, yeah.
And somebody will just walk right up, and their nose will be 2 inches from your nose, and it's like they're not even paying any attention to you. And they're right in your personal space. If it's a cold day, they're all wearing, like furry coats. And if it's a packed bus, they'll just pack in, and you can't even lift your arms. I remember I stand there, I feel like I'm in a box full of teddy bears. I'm packed around with all these fluffy things, and they're packed in so tight I can't even move.
Stay plenty warm that way.
Yeah, warm. And their idea of hygiene is different than ours. They may not have taken a bath for the last couple of weeks. And body odor is not something that they worry about very much. And sometimes just a lot of little things like that. They don't have the same kind of response when you ask them a question. We would just give a direct answer. They're very evasive. Their culture has taught them to just kind of hold back and not tell you everything. And they lie a lot. And just all kinds of different things where, what is wrong with these people? Well, they're just living the way they've learned to live.
Well, I imagine you lived under the Soviet Union. You didn't freely give up information at all.
Anybody who stood out or popped their head up and said, what's going on here, would disappear in the middle of the night. And that has a very cooling effect on people who have big ideas.
So people weren't that curious.
Right.
And they weren't willing to.
And they don't make eye contact. They don't smile. If you smile, they think you're crazy.
Really?
Yeah, they actually have a proverb that a smile without a reason is the sign of an idiot. And so you're walking on the sidewalk and just happy, smiling, waving at people, and they look at you like you just escaped from an insane asylum. And so you just kind of had to learn to not draw attention to yourself, and just a lot of different things that it's hard to explain unless you've been there. But
so it seems like personal interaction between people is not anything
very different.
Here. So how does that affect evagelism?
Well, at the same time, they have an idea of hospitality where if you go over to their house, they invite you in, they'll sit you down, they'll give you a meal. Well, you experienced that. You visited a Russian guy in Elgin, and you were just knocking on the door talking about church, and he said, well, come on in, sit down. Here's some fish sticks. Here's some cookies. Here's some tea. And they're taught to do that. Civilizations that have known a lot of poverty understand that if somebody's traveling, they need something. So they kind of learn to help each other. So it's kind of different extremes, but yeah, there are cultural differences.
So you as an American coming over to Russia, Russia and America at odds for many, 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 many years, they're suspicious of you, I imagine?
Russians have another thing I was going to say about Russia, about the Russian culture, is they have the ability to hold contradictions in their heads. They can think opposite things at the same time, and it doesn't seem to bother them. America is their least favorite country. They hate America. America is the country they hate the most because we are the bad guys. We're the enemies.
Sure.
But yet America is the country that they love the most. Anybody in Russia would give their right arm to go live in America and become Americans. They love American movies, music, culture. They want to wear American jeans. They love America, but they hate America. It's a very strange mix of love and hate. So it's the country that they focus upon the most. It's their biggest, they think about America all the time, how much they hate it, how much they love it, and I was a real curiosity.
Well, they fantasize about why they hate it, and at the same time, while fantasizing about it, I guess they have a desire to...
They know they'd rather be in America than in Russia.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So did you enjoy living in Russia? What was your overall impression?
We were comfortable there. We had made a life for ourselves. It was our home. We really did think of it as home. But I have to be honest, Russia's a dreadful place. It really is. It's a place that has a history of cruelty and bleak, horrible things have happened there in history. And bleak, horrible things still happen there. And I wouldn't say it's a nice place to visit. I would say you wouldn't want to live there, but I will say we had a blessed life there, and we were happy there, but not because of the place, but because we knew we were doing what God wanted us to do.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Brother Ossewaarde, for joining us. You'll find the previous video, like I mentioned, in the description below, and you can click on that link to find the previous video. But the next video that we'll be talking is children, your kids on the mission field, and you'll find the link to that video in the description below as well. I hope you have a good day.